Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom and our continuing discussion of now the foundations of the Renaissance, right? So we're going to pick up right where we left off in class, talking about the beginnings of the Renaissance period, talking about its kind of cultural roots within the growing out of the tragedies of the late Middle Ages and its expansion into mainly economics, right? And we'll be talking mostly in this flip about the economics of the Renaissance and about the growing intensity of the Renaissance that's going to be radiating itself out of Italy, right? So the big thing about it is go ahead and watch this whole flip because I had your first period and I got to give this thing up before last period, and I also had to teach all 4 classes today, so I had 0 time to actually get this done. The big thing about it is it's a very, very good flip that I actually use every single year. So y'all go ahead and enjoy. I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. In y'all's pockets. So economies actually rose really, really quickly. And a lot of it has to do with the rise of these things called guilds, right? Now, guilds are a hard thing to understand, but I need you to try your best, okay? Guilds are really, really intense because they're going to be a massive element of the economy of the Middle Ages going forward, and they're going to help people make tons and tons of money during the Middle Ages, okay? What they are they are groups, right? So now, think about it this way, okay? They are a group of workers that get together or trade items, and they organize to set a price on their product. Think about it kind of like a labor union, right? So it's like this. A guild would be like if I'm a teacher and I'm doing my own on my own and I'm trying to do my best. And so is Mr. Mathern. And so is Mr. Wooderson. And so is Mr. Madrano, right? A guild would be like if we all came together and we tried to figure out how to do this job to the best of our ability and we set a price on it, right? So that's going to make us more money and it's going to make our product even better, right? So we just started a teaching guild. Now, realistically speaking, in the Middle Ages, there weren't teaching guilds, but there were guilds of like craft makers and stuff like that, and smithing guilds like this one down here where they would actually make different items and like actually smith and make metal together. You had barrel making guilds because barrels were really important because they were huge for trade and you had to move your products throughout them. You had cobblers guilds, which they actually make, oh wait, what are we doing? Stop that. They actually had cobblers guilds right here that actually made shoes and other different items as well. You also had carding guilds who like separated wool and made textiles and stuff like that. But really quickly when you're looking at it, you had 2 types of guilds. You had merchant guilds and craft guilds, right? There's a reason why I have a star next to merchant guilds because they're going to be the really important one going forward. They're the ones who spread the Black Death unintentionally, but they're also going to be the ones that make money a little bit faster than everybody, right? Craft guilds are the ones that come together to make a product, right? And merchant guilds are trading the items that craft guilds are making, right? Guilds are going to become a very, very big deal and a very prominent group going forward, and they're going to make tons of money and help surge the economy of the Middle Ages forward. Now, because of this, now that we have more product moving around Europe, we now need people to trade that stuff for us. So return of trade is going to become a very big deal, right? Merchant guilds are going to begin importing things to Europe, right? They're going to start going over to Constantinople, or what would later be Istanbul, picking up products from the Eastern Golden Age, from the Monsoon Marketplace, things like spices and silks and all this different stuff, and bringing it back into Europe, right? They're going to start reinvigorating the European economy. Oh, by the way, this is a picture of Venice, and no, that's not me and my wife. That's just 2 randos I saw online. So the big thing about it, though, in general, they're going to do all these different stuff. Craft guilds are going to begin to specialize and sell their products via the merchants. But where is all this happening? Is it happening all over Europe? Or is it happening in a main place right now, right? Well, it's happening in a main area, right? It's happening in basically in Italy, right? Well, the Italian peninsula, sort of. But you have to understand, Italy didn't exist yet. Italy, the country, wasn't a thing. They were all broken up into these different little informal states that actually had their own governments and had their own like economics, and they had their own like different systems of taxation, and so they all ruled themselves independently, right? The big 3, though, that you're going to need to know, this is the chart for this unit. You know how like we had the feudalism diagram you had to fill in on the last test, then we had the Roman government chart you had to fill in on the last test, you had the Greek time periods you had to fill in on the last test. This is our chart this time. It's going to be a map, right? Because all these places and their locations are going to become very, very important, okay? And so if you want to draw this in your notes, you can. And like shout out Shay Victory, I know you're going to, right? I know this kid's going to draw it in her notes because she likes drawing things because it helps her remember it. Fonseca, I know you're going to draw this in your notes, right? I know Reese Tedesco, I know you're going to draw this in your notes. There's no question of these things in my mind. But looking at that entire thing, you don't have to draw in Italy if you don't want to. You can totally take a screenshot of it when I'm done if you want to know their location and just make a list. It's really up to you, right? Well, looking at it, though, we've got 3 important cities and I've been to most of them. I only haven't been to one of them. My wife's been to the one, and she really, really loved it, right? So that's not right. All right, so there we go. So the big thing about it, though, is these 3 important cities include places like Venice. Now, they're going to be a very important one going forward. Venice is the trade and importer and merchant city. For any of y'all that have seen pictures of Venice before, Venice is a city built on the water. It's got canals all over the entire city. They literally have these guys named gondoliers that transport people back and forth. There are water taxis in Venice, but why is this city constructed this way? It's so they could easily move product and trade things throughout the city, because you don't want to necessarily have to move it over a road, because that can be very, very treacherous during the Middle Ages. But Venice in general is the trade and import, come on, zoom in, there we go, trade and importer city. They had exclusive agreements with the Byzantine and the Ottomans to bring goods from the Eastern Golden Age or from the monsoon marketplace into Europe to have them being sold, right? Now, why do I have Byzantine and Ottomans? The Ottomans are the ones who took over the Byzantine. So when the Byzantine fell in 1453 to the Ottoman Turks, they made the same agreement with the Ottomans as well. So Venice is going to make tons and tons of money by bringing these special products like silks and spices and teas and all that different stuff from the Eastern Golden Age into Europe. Well, now that it's moving through Italy, this next one up here at the top is going to become a very important one as well. The city of Milan, right? The Milan is a trade hub, and I have been to this place in Milan. That is Il Duomo in Milan right there, and that is the gallery of Victor Emmanuel II. That's a huge mall that's actually in Milan in the modern era. And Milan, to this day, is considered the wealthiest city in all of Italy, right? Because it's a very important financial sector and stuff like that in northern Italy. But Milan is a trade hub. All the products that came from Venice needed to pass through Milan to get into northern Europe, like places like France and Spain and England and Germany. So what's going to happen when it's passing through Milan is they're going to tax it, and it's going to become a trade hub, and it's going to be a big reason, like Constantinople, that they're going to make a lot of money. If you need a product, you go to Milan, right? Because it's located there, because it's coming from Venice, right? So Milan's going to take tons and tons of money. And if I have time this weekend, I'm going to finally edit that vlog I made for y'all when I was in Milan and in Lake Como, okay? Now, the other big one is Florence, which is absolutely beautiful. Florence, write this down, is known as the cradle of the Renaissance, right? Cradle of the Renaissance, because it fostered it and helped it grow. Florence is very, very well known for making 2 specific items: textiles, and they created the idea of banks, which is going to be a very, very big deal. All the money that's now moving through Milan and moving through Venice needs somewhere to be kept safe. So the Florentines are going to keep it safe, right? And they literally put it in a safe and created the very first banks that Europe had ever seen, right? And it's going to be ran by one family. And they're super, super wealthy, and my wife and I have been there before. And this is one of those other really awkward pictures, but this one isn't terrible. It's a smirk. I can get away with it. But yeah, this is my wife and I in Florence, and that building behind us was actually paid for by a guild in Florence, right? It's called Il Duomo, or the Duomo in Florence, or the Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. The dome on top of it, it's very important. One of you is going to end up being a very important person to understand that, okay? So going forward as well, you also have the Papal States, right? The Papal States is going to be a really big one as well, because they literally are down in the middle, and it basically is Rome and the area that's controlled by the Pope, right? Papal, hence papal supremacy, Papal States, Rome. Rome in the center section of Italy are going to govern and rule the Catholic Church ever since Charlemagne, but they're going to become more of a political entity, less of an economic entity in Renaissance Italy, right? Now, the big ones you need to know for your test are going to be these 3 and where they're located. The Papal States is just going to help you understand Renaissance Italy a little bit better. But we're going to go ahead and cut it off right here, and we'll talk more about this stuff like banks and how they work and stuff like that in class when I see y'all soon. But y'all have a good one. All right, welcome back to it. Very, very nice to see all of y'all. Don't turn that thing off, right? We got a little bit more to talk about, right? So the thing that we need to understand, though, about is that, past Mr. Terry from last year just perfectly explained is he discussed the rise of Italy going into the Renaissance and why the Italian city-states, especially the northern Italian city-states of Venice, Florence, and Milan, are actually going to stimulate the economy leading into the Renaissance, right? And everybody actually, when you really look at it, you can actually kind of focus in on the fact that the Renaissance really had its birthplace in the Italian peninsula. And when we're looking at it, though, is when we're talking about that birth, that intelligence, that spark that lights the world, we're talking about the rise of none other than this thing, known as humanism, right? So what you need to understand, though, is that the increased economic times, right, under the Medici family of Florence, underneath all these other figures as well, the Venetian traders, underneath the Sforza family of Milan, they are going to have enough money to finance these people known as humanists, right? Humanists were intelligent thinkers from the time and era that began to actually re-examine old ideas from Greece and Rome and then discover new ones as well. Humanists are very, very important because a humanist is a person who believes in the study of worldly subjects, understanding the world around you and not focusing so much on theocracy, not focusing so much on religion, not focusing so much on the expansion of Christianity, but trying to understand what is going on around us at any given moment. And when you really look at ancient Greek and Roman thinkers like Aristotle and Plato and Socrates and guys like that, they are the ones that also believed in things that are going on in the world around us. Like, look at Aristotle, the ancient Greeks, sometimes referred to by some Arabic teachers during the time of their Eastern Golden Age as the first philosopher because they loved his work so much they translated it into Arabic, right? Aristotle focused on what is that animal? What is this animal? Why do things fall? Where is the earth in space? Do we move or does space move? And things like that. He wanted to try and understand the world that was around it. Greeks and Romans didn't focus completely on their religion all the time because they weren't necessarily focused on getting into heaven, which was a very, very major theme of the Middle Ages. Whereas in the Renaissance, they're going to act more like those ancient Greeks and Romans, and they're going to focus on the things that are going on around them. You could actually see this heavily in two different examples, both relating back to Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci, very, very famous figure from the Renaissance, of course, as we all should very, very much know. Though, like, Leonardo da Vinci was very, very famous for actually keeping journals. He kept medical journals, scientific journals, a journal on inventions and stuff like that. He actually wrote all of them in code and things like that, so he could actually put a mirror in the middle of the binding and then read everything in backwards, right? He didn't want anybody, like, seeing all of his ideas that he used to actually study human anatomy and inventions and stuff like that. He actually came up with like ideas on flying machines, and he's considered one of the most prolific scientific minds of the era, right? Something that we need to understand though about him as well is he was obsessed with like human anatomy so he could paint it better. He's very, very famous for, of course, like painting the Mona Lisa, right? The Mona Lisa, which is anatomically very, very correct, and it's also like proportional, and it's considered a very, very good structure of anatomical painting and drawing during the era of the Renaissance. Well, he learned about this by analyzing the human body. This right here is one of his most famous examples where he actually dug up and had got a hold of a dead body that was actually a woman who died before the birth of her child. And he did a dissection on it so he could actually see what the baby looked like when it was inside of the mother's womb. And as you can tell, he actually opened the entire body up so he could see what a child looked like when it was clutched up inside of the mother. He actually did drawings of the womb itself, did drawings of actually the tissue that was on the outside of the amniotic sac that actually connected it to the entirety of the female body. And another one that you famously know of is the Vitruvian Man, right? The Vitruvian Man is supposed to be the virtue of human proportions, right? He actually discovered while doing the Vitruvian Man that a person's height is about their like entire like wingspan. From fingertip to fingertip, that's about how tall you are, right? He also realized in this construct as well that the proportional human figure, actually the size of your foot is about vaguely the size of your forearm, right? So when we're looking at this entire thing, he is studying the human body. He is studying that child in the womb. He's studying the things that are around him. So he is a humanist. He's not focusing on like, where is God's involvement in this? He's just focusing on what is involved in this, right? And this is most visible in the massive explosion of art that then came immediately after the humanists began to rise up. Now, a big question that we need to understand, though, too, is why Italy, right? Why was Italy the focus of the Renaissance? Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that Italy was the home to the former Roman Empire. There were many ruins and artifacts there that are still in very good condition for study and interpretation. For example, Filippo Brunelleschi, who actually made the Brunelleschi's dome in Florence, actually went to Rome and studied the Pantheon so we could better learn how to make domes. And that Pantheon was built over 1,000 years before he was even born, right? So then the other big thing about it is it's a center for trade, right? The Papal States are located in Italy, so are Venice and Florence and Milan, which are massive trade states as well. And the other big reason, there's a couple of other big reasons as well, why Italy is going to be the focal point of the Renaissance also. And a lot of it has to do, for example, is one, the papacy is located there. The church is headquartered in Rome, which had a massive amount of funds, and they could pay a lot for artworks. Now, speaking of paying for artworks, that's the other big thing. It is the home of a lot of patrons, right? The Papal States and the Catholic Church is bringing in buttloads of money by this time in history. The European Continent Center for Banking is located in Italy as well, and we've got the growth of patrons. But we're going to talk about patrons and financial supporters of all these different artworks when I see y'all tomorrow in class, all right? Y'all have a good one.